Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to today's workshop. And what I would like to do first is turn to Mr. Matucci and ask him, do we have a quorum, Dave?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I'm not on, but yes, we do.
Okay. He said, yes, we do. All right, with that, we are going to move on with our Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody could rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, what you have in front of you today, on this side is the board of directors. Over there is our management, part of our board of directors, our treasurer, and the finance committee. And I'll go ahead and start off introductions, and we'll go around down here, and then we'll go down that one. I'm Bruce Alfonso, and I am the president of the board president.
Kathy Stevens, vice president.
Greg Ross, director.
Dave Matucci, secretary.
Pat Kite, director.
Del Mitchum, director.
Wendell Jackson, ditto.
Jerry Stein, committee member.
Shirley Brose, committee member.
Paul Nelson, committee member.
Chuck Gordon, treasurer and finance committee chair.
Jim Morgan, general manager.
Okay, this is the one workshop town hall that I really like because I'm done. I now get to turn it over to our treasurer, Mr. Chuck Gordon. Chuck, this floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone for coming out today to see all the hard work that we've done as a staff, as a committee, and ultimately the board today. So without further ado, let's start out with just giving an overview of what we do when we're compiling our budget. We have a budget development process. It actually starts off on the staff level. As you'll see, we have our department heads, Ken, Anthony, Kimberly, Colleen, and Kara. They put together budget assumptions for me and ultimately for Jim Morgan to look at. And in this case, this year, we had 42 budget assumptions that they provided us as a baseline to where we start our budget. And by the way, we have over 100 line items in our budget, so getting 42 from them from the get-go is a good head start. I go ahead and start putting them into a spreadsheet, and then after they're in, I start working with Jim Morgan very closely. There's tweaks that occur, and we change the narratives. Then we go into the evaluation process. We create a draft, and then we bring it forward to the Finance Advisory Committee here, and we have a much larger discussion in a meeting. We go over every single line item, essentially, and there are further modifications and adjustments from there. We have a very good committee that has no problem with challenging our assumptions all the way down the line, so there are adjustments that ultimately get made. Once the Finance Committee is satisfied with where we are at with the budget, and by the way, when we do our budgets, we take a very conservative approach. I like to call it a worst-case scenario approach. We don't try to take into account the probable, optimistic, the best-case scenario approaches. We'd rather be covered in case there are unforeseeable problems that could occur throughout a 12-month period during the fiscal year. So once we get to that point, then we bring it to our board, which is exactly what we are doing today in our workshop. The board has the opportunity to ask questions and to challenge the line items, and further tweaks could be adjusted before the ultimate budget is approved at a general session board meeting later this month. That is pretty much the nutshell of the budget process. Next page. That's the final budget process, is the board approving it at the next board meeting. after we have made a determination of what the budget will ultimately wind up being. So this is still part of the process for evaluation, but now we're going to get to the final budget process when it's approved. Next page. This is the owner assessment formula, and this is going to give you a snapshot right off the bat so you don't have to wait to find out 2 hours from now or an hour from now what the owner assessments are going to be projected at. This is the starting point of the meeting today, and then the first part of the discussion is what we wound up with. Our total operating expenses of $6,561,850. Now, the driver for our owner assessments, there's two variables, and that is operating expenses. That is really the driver of owner assessments. And then it's offset by whatever our other income is. And there's about a dozen line items where there is revenue flowing into our association from different sources other than our owner assessments. That's an offset, and then those two variables together, when combined, bring us to what our total assessments are, which is $6,623,046. Now, how does that relate to each residence? Well, we have 1,586 homes, so if you were to divide that number, it means that each home in the next fiscal year will be responsible for $4,176 of owner assessments. If you divide that by 12, that will give you your monthly assessment of $348. Now, that constitutes an increase of $15 compared to the prior or the current year's budget, or an increase of 4.5%. Next page. This is our budget summary. Now you'll see on the top line is our income. It has on the left column $6,861,850, and if you go all the way down to the bottom of the page where the expenses are, it's exactly the same, $6,861,850. This is a balanced budget. And then the monthly community income is $572,000 approximately. And when we get to the income per household, the top line that's in yellow, those are the owner assessments. And it should wind up, having trouble seeing it, $348, $15 increase on the right side on the top, and a 4.5% increase. It's the expenses, by the way, equal to an increase of $21.08, but there is an offset based on that formula of other income of $6.08, which will reduce the assessment to $15 even. Next page, and we're going to start now to get into the details. Is there any questions on that summary?
Just real quick, can you just remind the people what our fiscal year is so they know what month to expect?
Thank you. The fiscal year is going to commence May 1st, 2025, and it will roll all the way through to April 30th, 2026. Our current fiscal year is going to be going through April 30th, 2025. When we did our financials and when we were doing our analysis, initially I was working off of November financials, which was only 7 months deep into the budget. And then we fortunately got December, our arms around that, and we were able to take a look at the trends in December. So when we're doing these budgets, these are projections. We are trying to foresee into the future. The only hard numbers are contractual. The community management contract, the Allied Service Protection contract, our landscape ECM contract, the pool vendor. There's a few contracts out there, the ones who do our computers every month, the copier. But on balance, we're just making, projections based on prior history, from the prior year actuals, as well as trend lines through November and December. The next one is our first presenter this evening for administrative is going to be Shirley Braz, handling the administrative section.
Good afternoon. We will be looking in detail at the lines that make up all of the expenses before we talk about the revenues. And first on the list is administrative expenses. I will not be spending a lot of time on those lines which have not changed year over year. And so we begin with bad debts, which is the same as last year, $10,000. These cover lost revenue due to owners' failure to pay their bills. The next line is EPC, the Emergency Preparedness Program, and that has not changed as well at $4,000. Communications Committee, and that has actually reduced from $4,000 to $3,000. We're currently trending slightly under the budget, and so we will not be needing the total equal to last year, so that did go down. Bank charges, a very small amount has been spent this year, so we reduced the budget from $800 to $500 from last year. We have committees costs, which primarily covers the annual volunteer appreciation lunches, and that one will stay the same as last year at $7,000. Our board expenses, we have increased from $6,000 to $7,000. We are currently trending a bit over budget at 7 months, and this covers our board, as you know, opportunities of travel, education, and other miscellaneous items at the board meeting. So it went from $6,000 to $7,000. Our next line is decorations. Most of this is done by a contractor, and that's for mainly our December holiday exterior and interior, the trimmetry, et cetera. That stays at $10,000, which was last year's budget. The next line, dues, subscriptions, and certificate, has about 30 lines, which I am not going to read to you. Our budget went from $6,000 up to $8,000. A number of the subscriptions have increased in cost, and so we did bring the budget up $2,000 this year. Delinquency cost, this has had a change. This year we are budgeting $3,000 last year. We are budgeting $10,000 this year. It pertains to the hard cost billed to the association for the corporate staff doing the delinquencies. There are legal fees, collection fees, et cetera, that we do have to pay. And in addition to this delinquency charge of the account number is 5065, there are two others. And these are reimbursable expenses, account number 8867 and account number 8876. And prior years, those accounts were 7,600 and 10,590. And so we are moving those budgets to this line. Office equipment maintenance is our next line. It went from $23,000 last year to $25,000 this year. Most of that is a service cost of $14,900, and some of the unforeseeable lease parts and so on have gone up, so we did increase that budget. Office supplies is decreasing from $25,000 to $20,000. We are trending under the budget, and so we decreased that budget for the next year. Our record storage, small amount, 600, stays the same. The next line is our reserve study. As you know, the Davis-Sterling Act requires our association to perform on-site reserve study every third year, and that's where we will be next year. So we moved the budget from $4,000, which is a review study, to $6,000, which is the site visit and update and pictures for our new budget year. The next line is election services. We moved it slightly, $8,500 up to $9,000. We are expecting that service provider to increase the cost a bit. Next line is miscellaneous. We left it at $12,000. It is not known, that's why it's in there. It's a miscellaneous line item that will cover anything that pops up that we weren't expecting. Contingency line has not changed. That will remain the same at $20,000 as it was last year, in case there are any unforeseen things that happen. Printing and copying. That has gone down from $36,000 to $30,000. We are trending quite a bit under budget, and so we moved that budget downward. Our postage also was, we are trending under budget. However, we haven't made the big expense for the year yet, so we left the budget at $18,000, which was the same as last year. Community management staffing, this is, reflects a 3.5 increase in the hourly staff that works in the buildings, as well as exterior, the maintenance staff, cleaning staff, janitorial staff, outside janitorial staff, and that is increasing 3.5% overall. Plus, there is an increase in the outside janitorial service as well that we will see on a line to come. 6,600 is that line item. The insurance premiums, obviously, has gone up over this year, $104,000 to $127,000. And this, as you all know, is an unknown. The only thing that we do know is that it will go up, given the current of the environment in the last year. We did ask for an estimate, and they just couldn't estimate it yet, so we're anticipating an increase. The next line item is insurance claims, and these are for anything that is outside our insurance coverage. It was $2,000, it will be $2,000 in the new budget year, unchanged. Our telephone services are unchanged at $10,000, and that we hope will cover any service costs that we may incur. The internet service are those services that are for the Jackson Gatehouse, the Cal Oaks Gate, the Nutmeg Gate, the Clubhouse, plus infrastructure, Wi-Fi upgrade. All of those are rolled into this internet services line, which we increased from $11,000 to $12,000. Permits and licenses has actually decreased from $4,000 to $3,480. And so we are a bit below budget. Staff uniforms stay the same at $6,000. Those are for uniform laundering for designated staff members. Our audit and tax services has been for a number of years right at $3,000. We anticipate an increase from our auditor after that long a time, and was going from $3,000 to $3,200, a small increase. Consulting services has decreased from $26,000 to $8,000, and that's because our major consultant has reduced his hours of consulting for us in the communications and technology, and we're able to handle a lot of that work ourselves. Legal services increased from $6,500 to $7,000, and this is general legal expenses as well as other items pertain to potential litigation. It covers legal consulting, attending our board meetings, telephone calls to cover anything that might come up, conference calls, and other legal advice. We are trending around $70,000 this year, and so we anticipated that our new budget should be at $70,000. Legal service collections, those have gone down from $6,000 to $2,000. We're trending under budget for the 7 months to date, and so those collection services will not require as large a budget as it has. Legal services lawsuits, we've increased from $140,000 to $150,000 based on our legal counsel's assessment for the estimated cost that may incur in the next year. And that does include the $15,000 deductible items that we have to pay for the Bosworth complaint. Community management contract, our next line, is $14,486, and this is $1,208 per month, which has its own line this year. Management extras, that line stays the same at $1,000 per year for any miscellaneous costs that incur that are not otherwise covered in our management services contract. And the total administrative expense budget is $1,970, up from $1,929, and that represents about 29% of the full budget of expenses.
Thank you, Shirley. And just a side note on the administration, the increase was only 2.15%, which is pretty good for that particular category, and went up since the last budget. It went up $41,545. The next line item is community events. It's under communication. This line item reflects the amount expected to be paid out for community paid events. Now, this is, of course, a huge thumbnail projection because it's based on the events that the activity director, Kara, will create throughout the year on the benefit of the community, the paid events, bringing in the tribute bands and the comedians and other entertainment, so forth, paid events. So we're expecting that in the aggregate, we will pay out $100,000. Last year, by the way, we had zero budgeted. But the problem with that is that when you're doing your financial reporting every month, it looks like a tremendous eyesore, like you got $80,000 over budget. And then on the income side, it kind of gives a misinterpretation of our income because it conversely could show that we have $100,000 of income. Well, really, they're offsetting accounts. There's a comparable account that we're going to discuss later on when I do income that offsets this account on the income side. So we're just threw in a number of $100,000, and we think it might be reasonable. We'll see. The next one is utilities, and Paul Nelson's going to deliver on that.
Good afternoon. Is this on? Okay,
Yeah.
good. Like Shirley, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on things that have decreased or are the same price, same amount budgeted. But electric service has gone down from $140,000 to $130,000, and that's based on what we're trending right now. Our gas service, the same thing, has gone from $100,000 down to $80,000, again, based on trending right now. Water service is going to decrease about $1,000, whereas trash and recycling, there's no change, $7,000. And cable TV service, there's no change, $1,000. So total utilities are $233,000 for this coming fiscal year versus $264,000 for the previous year.
Hey,
Yes.
Chuck, just real quick. I assume after each section, you'll stop and ask for if there's any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
I shall do that from henceforth.
Are there any questions?
I have one. I just want to clarify, this water service is the potable water to the clubhouse. It's not landscaping water, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And
You had a question, Bruce?
actually, I got a question on the last section.
Oh, okay.
And I think Jim may have to answer this one. It's on the printing and copying. What's driving that down? I know it's small potato, it's only $6,000, but going from 36 down to 30, are we getting better at digitizing or?
The contract that we have for the copy machine includes a considerable amount more of black and white copies than what our previous contract had. So we had overstated last year And we didn't realize the level of savings we were going to see with that new contract. And so we believe that that's where that savings has come from.
Oh, okay. That's good. Dell's got a question, it looks like.
Chuck, can I go back to 5195?
That's in administration?
Yeah. What's the numbers in the white there, the 39,000 and the 330,000?
What was the number, 51
95,
Miscellaneous.
miscellaneous?
yeah.
And what was the question?
What are the numbers off in the white section there, 39,908 and 330,000?
There's a previous year spending.
2 years ago, 22, 23.
Yeah, so.
Oh,
Went
in
from
the column, I see,
39,000
yes.
down to 12,000? Or, and the 330,000 is what?
That's the golf course.
Golf course.
Yes, the 330,000 was when we were removing equity to pay for the golf course. We had nowhere to put it. We had no budgetary item for a golf course, so we were throwing it in miscellaneous.
Okay.
Yeah.
We
So-
also had some consulting that was done, it hit that line as well. That was unexpected.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for next time, just from a learning experience here, it would be good when the paper copies are made to carry the headings page to page.
Yeah.
Because when you turn to that page, there's,
You got to go back to the beginning to see
Yeah.
what that column's about.
Right.
So, since we're still on admin, under record storage, is that physical record storage or is that electronic record storage?
Electronic.
Oh,
And
really?
actually, it's both. All of your financials and everything at our Foothill office, we have to store all of that.
Oh.
So that's just a standard base fee that's charged per account.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on administration or utilities for that matter?
looks like we're good.
Okay. Just before we move on to utilities, just quickly, utilities are going down 11.74% from last year, or $31,000. The next line, or the next section, is landscaping, and Bob Miller is going to be handling that.
Way to go, Bob.
All right, okay, everybody. How do we do this? All right. Now, Dave, I'm not supposed to go,
That's right. And you don't have to be right on top of it.
okay.
Stay back here.
I made a mistake on my last time, so I'll try and be better. All right, landscape. First line, landscape water. This is what goes to water, everything else besides the clubhouse. We are increasing it from $420,000 to $500,000.
Yay.
We are doing that because right now we are significantly over budget. And no matter how we run it, we're going to be at least $80,000. We budget differently. Anthony budgets away for landscape committee and that. The colony budgets straight line monthly. But looking at it, bottom line, we will at least be $80,000 over budget for water.
That's correct.
That is because we budgeted $420,000 because we had been under that the last couple of years. We are anticipating the same cycle as this year. Well, we now have a drought. We had a lot of hot weather, and we're still having hot weather. So we have felt that we needed to increase that budget to $500,000. I know it's a huge amount of money, but we want to keep the plants alive, and we feel we have to do that. And I think the landscape committee is highly in favor of that. And we follow water in the landscape committee. Bruce Copeland is our member that does that, and he and Anthony, he's very detailed, and we have a lot of detail in that. So we feel that I'm on landscape too. We feel that's a reasonable
Yeah, I think
amount.
that's really great because the fixed charges have gone up by 7.5%. Rancho raises it twice a year, January, and another one's coming in July. The tier structure has increased. And so there's just no way you can continue to do that. If you multiply it even by 1.075, you're going to get to 485 anyway,
Yeah.
which is what we're going to end up spending if we're budgeting 420. So
And
Thank
just
you.
to understand tiers, if you look at your water bill, you will see tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. Tier 1 is the base one. When we talk about upper tiers, higher tiers, it's tier 2, 3, 4. That is where a lot of our cost is falling. Because what the water company is doing is, it is decreasing the amount of water in each tier you have to get to, and then increasing the cost of each tier. So we're just in a no-win situation, like a double whammy.
Right.
So that's why we feel, just the way it's going, that we need to do this.
And just so you know, that the green belts only take up about 25% of the total water. 75 to 80% is lawns. So that's where it's going, and we can't rip out lawns.
No.
So that's even more money.
So that's why we're doing this. Just,
Palm trees are lovely, thank you.
just easy, Kathy. We'll get the palm trees, Kathy. All right. The next number of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 categories, you see contract. These are governed by our current contract with EC. So these are 2.5%. It called for a 2.5% increase this year. And I believe this is the last year, Jim, or is it coming up for renewal next year?
I think so.
Okay. So anyway, if you go through 601, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 105, these 6 and 7, these are all areas that are under contract for maintenance. So that's just a built-in amount. Now we get into the individual ones that Anthony has some control over. And most of these, we have remained the same amount last 3 years. I looked in the budget, and they were the same amount for the last 3 years. Some of these we've increased. Anthony feels that we have to do this to meet up with inflation. That he's been very good at keeping it. Anthony's a great guy. He follows that budget, and a lot of times you'll see we don't spend any more than we budgeted. But at this time, he feels, and I think, that we need to increase some of these areas. Let's see, while there is drainage, okay, that stays the same. That's been this is the 4th year we're doing that now. He feels we're comfortable with that. He did increase the trimming of the front yards. Each year we trim front, I think half a year, right, at 6 months, yeah, we figured. One half for 1 year, and we do the other half the next year. So he feels that should be raised, and the amounts that we've raised is 10%. So he feels that $29,000 is a more reasonable amount to get for these. Trimming the green belts, again, the front yards are the trees, your little tree in the front yard, and I guess also the plants. The green belts are the areas that we're walking in between the houses and that. And he's increased that 10% to $15,000. Palm tree trimming, okay, we've raised this to $80,116. That is because when we did this, when we did the contract a couple years ago, they gave us just a line item. This is how much each year you're going to pay for the palm trees. And Jim looked at that and said, why can't we tier this? I mean, let's not have the whole amount first year, second year, third year. So they gradually increased it up to this amount. And right now we're 1% to get the top of that. So that's just we don't have to increase it a great deal. And we're still staying under that so far. And this is a one-time, we only spent $72,000 this year. But it's a one-time charge. But the trees are growing, and they charge different fees for the height of the fees. 15 feet, Anthony? Yeah. Anything above 15 feet is a different trimming fee than above 15 feet, so below and above. So all our trees are growing, so that is going to increase. But that is where our palm trees are. Any questions?
Just for clarity, if I could throw out there on the 15-foot height, anything that's 15 foot and below is actually covered under the contract, the base contract. So anything over the 15 feet falls to that line that we were just discussing.
I just want to make sure you might have said it. I just missed it if you did. 61, 32, 33, 34, and 36. It's all tree trimming we're talking about.
Yes, tree trimming.
All right,
which we do once a year. Each year, you'll see them.
Right, no, I get it. It just says trimming. I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It wasn't just.
And they're all trees over 15 foot tall.
Yeah.
All right. And then the trimming of the wild belts we raised that a bit. Again, it's been 3 years at 7,200, Anthony, and we feel we need to bring that up to a reasonable amount now because inflation is taking over. Okay, mulch replacement, we kept that the same. We felt that.
Can I ask why? When the shipping charge is now $1,400, so you can't get as many loads when it used to be $600, along with the actual mulch. So the mulch has stayed relatively the same, and the shipping is now double.
Right.
So you can't do 7, 8 loads for the same amount of money. So you're taking greenbelt mulch and you're trying to squeeze it into the front lawns and planters, or you're negating front lawns and planters. I think we had really asked for a modest increase of about 10%, which was only going to be back to where it was at about 60,000. But he's managing it, but it just, you can't spread the thing that far when shipping is now $1,400 on the load.
Understand, when you look at the individual landscape, I can make that argument, but we look at the whole budget. We increased water $80,000. I think our decision was we wanted the place to look green, not to have pretty tree wells, which you're putting the tree wells and the planters.
So you're saying that's the trade-off?
$80,000,
Yeah.
it's just, we raised it, we're trying to be reasonable on that, and we just felt that $80,000 to water to keep everything green is, and not put it into mulch. That was, again, you're the board, you can do what you want to do. This is our recommendation to you. This is why, but that's our reasoning. At least I feel comfortable with it, and I'm on a landscape committee, that we,
Yeah, he has to answer to Jan and the rest of them at another meeting.
No, I get what you're saying. We can have discussions on that,
Yeah.
what we want to do. But,
Right. I would love to increase the mulch, and maybe we won't do as much water, we'll get a lot of rain next couple of months, and we can understand that. But right now, we came down the side of keeping the lawns watered and the plants watered and not putting more mulch in.
I get it. Right now, though,
Understand?
it's not looking good for a lot of water, so I understand.
No,
why.
and if you want brown lawn, our lawns are starting to stress now. If you look at them, they're turning brown, but that's because of cold weather and we're not watering a lot. It has been hot. So if people want brown lawns, hey, that's,
Yep.
it's up to the board,
Thank you.
Okay. No, I knew that was covered because we have a little thing on mulch, so, anyway, all right.
The mulch came.
Is that different than our thing?
Well, you didn't ask me a question on our thing, so that's palm trees if you want. I was waiting for two of the people over there to come after me. All right, moving on to sod and seed replacement. That's remaining constant. We've done that for 3 years, the same amount. Tree trimming, clubhouse gates, that's the same amount. Okay, tree removal, they have to pay for that. Now, the next three categories, 6296, 6297, 6298. Minor sprinkler repair, convert spray nozzles, and 4 to 6 inch pop-up sprinklers. We are moving this to the reserves. There is a line item in reserves, irrigation. And because we have an irrigation system, we're constantly replacing that, major repairs in that, so that's a reserve item. These are also repairs. These are, when you have a bad valve or a bad sprinkler of that. So, right, so logically, think about, we can put these in reserves and be, not have any, we shouldn't be questioned by that. So we're taking around, I think that comes out to $11,000 in budget that this was, and we're moving that over into reserves. So, and then the last one is water meter backflow, water meter and backflow. Again, for 3 years, we've had that at 7,600, and Anthony feels we need to go up that a little bit to that level. So our total budget is $1 million, or is sure, like say $1,875. $1,875,546, which is 27.3% of the budget. That's a big chunk.
How much?
27.3% of the budget is $1,875,546. Last year, we were 27.4% of the budget at that amount. So, And we've raised the landscape by 5.83%, which is 103,000, which is the water and the increases in some of the contracts and that. So that's landscape. Any more questions?
I have a question maybe for Jim. I remember, I think it was the fire department about moving some trees for a fire break up top there in Cal Oaks area. Has that been negated, or we need the budget for that, or where are we with that?
We have not met with the fire marshal yet to determine what the magnitude of the removal of high fuel vegetation. So there isn't a specific line in the budget that's identifying that yet. We don't know the magnitude of it. But what we do know is that the city, because they have the same problem themselves with, actually, they have a much worse problem than we could ever have with needing to comply with the state of California. And that's all driven by the ability to get insurance, and a lot of insurance companies are leaving the state of California. And of course, now that we've had these LA fires, that has magnified all of this quite a bit. But what the city has said already, the fire department has stated that they would work with us with a plan, that we wouldn't have to comply overnight kind of thing, that we can, as long as we have a plan that's going to accomplish it within a reasonable amount of time, that it would be acceptable. So what we would have to look at is the reserve study for renovation, like we did the turf reduction, which wouldn't necessarily hit the operating side to the degree that the reserve contribution may change based on that, but it wouldn't have a significant impact on the operating side, I guess is my point.
All right, thank you.
No further questions for landscape? All right, the next portion of the budget is gate entry patrol services, and Wendell Jackson is reporting on that.
One of the harder topics. The property protection went up about 40,000. That's for our guards and stuff, our guards and their technicians. It represents about a 5.93% increase, and that's strictly by contract. Now, property protection supplies were remaining the same as last year. Vehicle gate repair, that's the damage to the gates that has not been able to be captured to one individual or whoever did it. That is also remaining at 10,000, same as last year. Preventative maintenance for the system, also remaining at 10,000, same as last year. And last but not least, gate access system, the software fees. That is a gratis as long as we stay with our current company. It is a freebie. The prior carrier, we had to pay, I think it was a couple thousand a year or a month, and that's it. So we have a 748,000 budget item, and that's up from 718,000, and it represents about a 5.68% increase, or about 12% of the budget. Any questions?
Just real quick, for vehicle gate repair, how do we account for the in and out, where we do pay for it to get fixed and then we can recover it from whoever broke it? Do we have line items for that, or how do we handle that?
I'm not sure I 100% understand
Well,
the question.
what he said was this was 6461 is uncollectible gate repair. So how do we account for money we spend and money we bring in from a resident to repair it? When a resident breaks the gate and they do pay for the repair.
It's in a receivable account where we're tracking it, and if we don't collect, it's going to hit that line against that,
Got it.
that amount that's been
Totally, I
budgeted.
get it now. Makes sense.
So, yeah. And we always want to collect, but sometimes we don't know we can't track the person that caused the damage.
Got it.
Bruce?
Yep.
Jim, this is for you, and I'm not even sure this is the right forum, but as long as we're talking about Allied, number one, I think Steven and his guys on site do a great job. I think where they fall down, and it's Peter, will not help us out getting iGate straightened out. That software has issues, and Colleen's been after him for months now. We've been trying to get it fixed, and he just blows us off. So the fact that it's free, I'm thinking it's worth it. They really need to take care of that. I mean, it's a contractual thing. We pay for that service, and we're not getting it serviced.
Yeah, I could follow up with Colleen to get the specifics of what we're still dealing with. My understanding, the last we spoke about it was primarily the app, the use, trying to encourage the residents to sign up on the app.
Well, actually, yeah, there's several things. The app and the desktop are totally different.
Yeah,
They
they're-
don't work the same. We've been trying to get the QR codes for permanent resident or permanent guest, and it just doesn't get done. So I think we deserve better than that. for
Yeah,
what we're
I'll
paying them.
follow up on that.
Thanks.
Any more questions on gate entry and patrol?
I think we're good.
Okay, thank you. The next one, the next section is repair and maintenance, and Paul Nelson is going to report on this category.
Okay, fire prevention equipment, we've gotten estimates from our two providers, i.e. Alarm and IR Fire, and we have a slight increase of $500 from $3,500 to $4,000. HVAC services, there's no change from our contractor, $18,000. Pest control for insects is going from $2,200 to $2,400, $200. General repair and maintenance is going up, and that's going up $52,000. And if you look at that, that's because we now have an outside janitorial service. Excuse me?
I'm sorry, I'm just
She was talking to herself. Go
Yeah, I was
ahead.
talking.
Okay. Outside janitorial service, which is $52,000 annually. The pest control for the rodents, the squirrels, the bees, and the rabbits is going up from $27,000 to $32,000. And that includes the bee removals, it includes structure bee removal as well, the rabbit mitigation, et cetera. So we anticipate that'll go up $5,000. Termites, repair and maintenance, there's no change. Pool chemicals, there's now a $1,000 decrease for the next fiscal year. So our total repair and maintenance is going from $101,700 to $158,400. Any questions?
I have a question. The contracted cleaning service, janitorial service, a $52,000 increase, is that a substantial increase from when we used to do it in-house? Or is it now?
Well, it would be because it's the same people that are on staff now.
Right.
That you're paying for and have been paying for. We are now bringing in another service to do that piece of it. So, yeah, it's increasing by the $52,000. 100% of that is a hit.
Right.
That we didn't have in the previous budget.
Right.
As I had explained at other times when we had similar conversations, the maintenance department, our general maintenance staff, they are have, since I've been here, they've been required to wear 3 hats, cover 3 different disciplines that most on-site situations like this HOA, like the Colony, are 3 departments or 3 different staffs that handle those different services. One being janitorial. There would be a separate company or a separate staff that would do, all their job is to clean the facility. And a lot of that work, the deep cleaning, is done after hours when the clubhouse closes. They would maybe have a day porter, which is really the $52,000 is covering more of a day porter type service where they come in for 3 hours during the morning hours and 3 hours in the evening to do the cleaning 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. So the current general maintenance staff will have to do that cleaning on the weekends still, like they had in the past.
Okay.
So that's one discipline that typically has its own department. You also have a facility monitor department that this type of operation would cover. And what that is, which is the substantial amount of time and why we have to have the size of the staff we have, is that they cover all hours of operation. So 7 days a week, 6 a.m. in the morning till
10?
actually 11 o'clock at night, because they had that extra hour for doing extra cleaning. So you're covering 7 days a week of that. So they're spreading them out pretty thin, the 5 guys that we have doing that. And then and they do all the setups, and they deal with, again, hours of operation. They help wherever needed.
Clubs and
For
everything.
the things that Kara needs for her
Sure.
department. They support her. So you can go to any HOA that has this kind of operation. They've got separate staff that does just that. And then the third is the maintenance, the general maintenance for your facility, to make sure you're doing preventative maintenance and taking care of doorknobs and lights and cleaning, the things that need annual cleaning, like parking lot light fixtures and things of that nature, fixing doorknobs. So that would be its own department as well. So we've been spreading them thin, and there have been things that have fallen short over the years. So when we were put in the circumstance that we were when we were short-staffed, we needed a quick fix. And we had done this during COVID for a period of time where we were short-staffed then, and we brought in some janitorial, and they did a good job then. So we brought them back when we were short-staffed recently. And there was this noticeable difference by many residents commenting about it. The board commented about it. It's like, man, you go into the bathrooms, they smell good, they look clean. And it's like, okay, well, there's the difference. You've got somebody coming in and they're focused on that specific thing, and it's made an impact. So this year it was proposed that we see what it looks like to have it in the budget.
Would an increase in staff, are we at full strength?
As of this week, yes. We just brought on the 5th
Okay.
maintenance, general maintenance position is now filled, and so we're looking
I
forward.
just was wondering if staffing with salary and benefits and everything that goes into it would still be less than what we're paying for an outside contractor. 52,000, I don't know, maybe not. If we continue to spread it out.
What we put ourselves at risk at is going back to what we were experiencing before, where we run the risk of falling short again because we have them doing too many different types of things. And so this is more of a, let's see how this works.
Okay.
And if this tends to be a step in the right direction, then it will be a long-term solution going forward, where now they'll only have to wear 2 hats instead of 3.
Okay.
Or they wear the 3rd hat for a little bit of the time, but instead of the majority of the time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
What percentage of the budget is the repair and maintenance, Paul?
We are on repair and maintenance. Are we finished with that, Paul? You still?
With the percentage, she was just asking the percentage of it.
Percentage of the budget. I'll get out the calculator and let you know.
Oh, okay.
About 3%?
Well, it's
Three?
gone up 55% with that additional service. From the previous year, that section has gone up 55% because of the janitorial.
No, like,
Of the
the
total
previous where you had gate entry and patrol service, you said that was 12% of the budget. So I'm just trying to I'm keeping track of the
2.3%.
categories and what percent of the budget they are. So I don't have one for utilities, and I don't have one for repair and maintenance.
Chuck has put in,
2.3%, I believe.
For repair and
yeah,
maintenance?
2.39, it's about 2.4.
I guess 3.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The next section is the golf course distributions. And because there is the possibility that we will have to maintain a receiver in place into the fiscal year, unfortunately, we had to project a potential of a yearly amount, and we came in at, we project around $250,000, which is a reduction from the $293,000 and change which we did this year. The good news, if there is any good news, is that the receiver, in its last recent financials, their own reporting of their own losses, they were down to, they were at one point, we started out a couple years ago, they were like 360,000, and then they were a little over 300,000, which is what resulted in last year's budget of being at around 293. The good news is they have dropped losses to 250. So it's still a pig, but the pig is not as ugly as it was a couple years ago. And $250,000 is where they are now as far as the funding goes. The good news is there are $36,000 as of December, 8 months in, they're $36,000 under budget. If things were to maintain itself through the rest of the fiscal year, they would be coming in under $250,000 in terms of golf course funding requests. It would project to actually slightly under $240,000. So I think $250,000 is relatively safe at this point as a number to estimate, because that's basically what we're doing here is estimating. There is a very strong possibility that the receiver will not be in place throughout the whole fiscal year, so it will be much more reduced than this, in which case those funds can be repurposed. Originally, when we viewed that there could possibly be a settlement in place between Majestic and the association, Jim and I had actually had that number at 200,000. Not as a golf course subsidy per se, but we were thinking of repurposing it for the restoration and maintenance of some of the fingers. Because we had a budget for the fingers that we had received from Anthony of $500,000. So we were factoring in an amount of $200,000 over a 3-year period, which would cover the restoration and maintenance over a phase-in of 3 years. So there's a possibility that some are in whole or in part of these funds that we now have in the golf course subsidy number, which is 250, can be repurposed at some point during the year. And we're optimistic that that could be the case, as well as the litigation cost, which we came in at $150,000. Originally, Jim and I had that at a $40,000 a number in our administration cost, because we were extremely optimistic, and $40,000 was still a conservative number for litigation, considering we have zero, or would have zero. So that would shave off $110,000 too. So those are funds that could be potentially repurposed downstream before the end of the next fiscal year. That is why I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that we were taking a worst-case scenario approach. So that's the golf course. Is there any questions regarding that? No? Okay, thank you. The next one is clubhouse operations. And our speaker here is Jerry Stein, who's making his first appearance of the day.
Kathy, your question about utilities, 3.4%.
How much?
3.4.
3.4, thank you. What was golf course, Chuck?
The golf course is 250. You know what I'm gonna do next time is put percentages of these damn sheets.
Well, everybody
I
else
shaved off
is,
some-
everybody else is.
That was the
3.6.
one percentage he missed, was the
No,
one
I-
you're asking
I had it.
consistently.
3.6.
I took the, it's a hidden column in there.
Let me ask Shirley, the only woman over there.
Oh, wait a minute, maybe I have it in
3.6.
here.
Thank you, Shirley.
And she probably knows that off the top of her head, too.
Yeah. It's actually in there on, I have a real big sheet that has about several more columns and they're hidden. And they're hidden
okay.
from me,
It's okay, Chuck.
including the percentage. I'll get you the golf course in a minute, but in the meantime,
just gave
we'll
it to
go
me.
on to the clubhouse while I do my calculator.
She's got it.
She does?
He's hilarious.
Great. Then let's proceed with Jerry and clubhouse operations. This is an exciting category.
Well, first of all, the good news is that it hasn't changed a dime from last year. The first category, furniture and equipment, was $5,000 last year, $5,000 this year. Next category, closed-circuit TV, which is really a misnomer because it involves the digital bulletin boards, AV equipment, community website maintenance, cloud storage fees, et cetera. So we'll probably rename that category, but that stays at $15,000 like it was last year. Indoor plant maintenance, $7,000 last year, $7,000 this year. Pool monitoring was $7,000 last year, went down $1,000 to $6,000. And then in pool management, last year was $19,000, this year's $14,000, a $5K reduction. Next on pool equipment, it was 10 last year and 10 this year. Clubhouse supplies was 15 last year, 20 this year, 1,000. Coffee supplies, last year was 12,000, this year, fiscal year, we're anticipating 13,000. Fitness, which was a $1,000 increase. Fitness equipment, maintenance, repair was 8,000 for last fiscal and this fiscal. Janitorial supplies and maintenance was 40,000 last year, the same this year. Next category, 6,700, pool supplies, non-chemical. That was 3,000 last year, 3,000 this year. And last category is a recreation-sponsored events, 17,000, which is the same as last year. The total of all these categories is 158,000 like it was last year. Coincidentally, the four line items that moved, one had a $1,000 reduction, and then there was another 5,000 reduction, and then there was a 5,000 increase and a 1,000 increase on the other side. So they washed out at $158,000, which represents 2.4% of the budget.
Thank you, Jerry.
Any questions on clubhouse operations? No? All right. The next one is reimbursable expenses, presented by Shirley Braz.
It's not a whole lot of presentation to do. There's no budget, nor was there a budget last year. And as I said when we spoke about administrative costs, we have moved those items and their budget to, thank you, what's the number? To 5065 delinquency charges. And 2 years ago, it was 7,600, as I mentioned, and 3 years ago, it was 10,590. So those are being combined, and that explains the increase in that budget. That's it, unless you have questions.
Any questions on reimbursable expenses? Good. It's a complicated one, actually. The next one is taxes, and Shirley is our resident tax expert on the team, so Shirley will take it away.
I think the biggest thing to understand about the taxes is that the budget that we have for next year, which is $48,000 Fed, $22,000 state, is that expense is for the non-related income that we earned this year. So, and changes in investments, CD interest, et cetera, the income from our interest is what we pay next year once the tax return is filed, and that's at 30%. But there are adjustments to that. So I think the $48,000 Fed is adequate. It's up from $37,000 this year in the budget, and we are trending more than that as far as payments are concerned. And $70,000 is 1% of the budget.
Any questions on taxes? Excellent. Then let's go on to reserves. Now the reserves, by the way, it's 18.9% of our budget. Want to get that one out of the way. And it is now $1,297,715. We are recommending a pretty big increase of 10%. And that's because the board, of course, wanted an increase last year, and the board is very, very concerned about our reserve funding levels as well we should. It was in the low 60s, as we recall, from the last study at a 63%, give or take, right around in that area. We would like it to be at least 70% or higher, and I think the best way to get there is to have a number of years where we're coming in at 10%. So this is probably going to be a repeating theme from our finance committee over the next few years at least, till we get our reserves really healthy. Moreover, we do expect some major reserve expenditures looming in the near future with the patio project and things of that nature. So we have it in at a healthy number, we think, at 10%. Jim did mention it to our reserve specialist, and I think the reaction was favorable by him when he heard what we were doing or proposing. So our reserves are in a good, a healthy contribution. It will be $108,143 per month, by the way. It's right now coming in at 98. And we're trying to stick the money into CDs as that money comes in, and try to eliminate as much cash drag as possible in the accounts that don't pay anything. But when you have big looming projects, i.e. the pavement, which we're expecting next year at $500,000, who knows, we'll probably phase out the patio project maybe over 2 years, at least if we can, but there's still $5,600,000 coming through we expect next year. So $1.3 million is going to be going into the account, which is a good thing, to help defray those costs. That's it with reserve. Do I have any questions regarding reserves? Yes, Bruce.
Excuse me. Just to make sure, if I remember right, 70% is a goal that is an aggressive goal, and we like that. But the industry standard, we're at 63 now, right?
Right.
Isn't the standard in the industry around 60?
66? I thought it was 66.
No, the high 60s, you really want to be in the 70s is the
That's what, okay.
the standard is in the 70s. Some associations strive for 100%, but most don't believe that that's a reasonable goal because it's just ends up being too much money that we're sitting on.
Yeah.
So the 70% range.
But I know there's some that go the other way. They collect
Yeah, some
reserves.
don't fund at all. And just for those that are listening, reserves are, having a reserve study is required by law. What isn't required by law is funding reserves. So the fact that you're funding your reserves and you've always taken that seriously, you need to be commended for that. And I realize we've had some pretty aggressive projects over the last several years that have been chipping away at reserves. But there is a plan to recover and get us back into that 70% range in, a fairly short period of time. Meaning, in the 5-year range, we should be back in the 70s pretty solidly, mid to high 70s.
Okay, thank you.
And this year, our reserve expenditures will, in all likelihood, could be very well less than what we took in through contributions and our interest earned. Next year could be a different story.
Sure.
Thank you. That concludes the expense portion, and I'm going to be touching upon the income section. Now, the income section is composed of basically two areas. Obviously, the one that we're most concerned about as a community is the owner assessment category. That line item where we have $348 currently on this current budget, which represents a variance or an increase of 4.5% over last year, or $15. Then we have another income section, and there's like about a dozen or so, give or take. Actually, about there's 15. There's 15 categories. 14 categories in that section that comprise other income, and we'll go over them briefly. We have a 4154 called golf course activity, and some of us refer to it as the gate fees that we usually have an invoice. Well, not usually, we routinely have an invoice every month, and it ranges in the $500 to $600 range, and it's based on the allotment, the proration of the reserves for maintaining certain areas around the gate. And we have that projected as $7,300. Now, we have not collected on that, although we have put liens on the property. We recently added it to the lien with the attorney fees of about $36,000. There was a time when we were collecting it, and there was a time when it was included in one of the awards that we prevailed on for the attorney fees a few years back. So there is the prospects of recoupment, and there also is the prospects of recoupment if we get the acquisition of the course eventually, and we have it managed properly. Then we have gate and access transponders. We have kept that the same at $3,500. Key income, that's for the main facilities, like to the pool, $700. Move-in fees, $38,000, went down modestly by $2,000. Now, earlier on the expense side, I mentioned about under communication or community events, where we were budgeting an expense of $100,000. This is the offsetting account where we're budgeting exactly the same amount for income, because in a perfect universe, it's kind of like a wash, although we might end up with a little more money, potentially, if the shows are selling out. But if you have a show that does very poorly at the gate and we pay the entertainers more, we could end up losing on that particular event. So we have $100,000 plugged in there because we plugged in 100,000 in expense. Landlord fees, we collect, as you know, a modest $100 from the owner who are using their lots as an investment opportunity. The fee is assessed every time there is a change in residency. So we had at one point actually collected in the prior year budget $3,155. Our current budget is at $2,000, and we're keeping it at $2,000 in this budget. Then we have the salon rental. We do anticipate, as we have been historically, increasing the lease annually by $25, which is a very, very, it's almost a token increase as much as it is anything else. But nevertheless, we view the salon as an amenity. So you might say that it's very favorable for the salon, as well as for the community to have it. Then we have an equity subsidy line. At this time, we did not budget anything in here, so it remains blank. Then we have collection processing fees. Now, this is the recoupment of hard costs that the association had previously incurred, such as delinquency, dunning letters, pre-liens, etc. And we have collected in excess of $7,000 through 7 months already. So we believe that putting in $5,000 is a reasonable estimate. Could be a little low, but nevertheless, we're keeping it at 5. Then we have non-NSF or non-sufficient fund service fees. Again, these are the recoupment of hard cost. We have $1,000 in there. We actually collected $1,650 in receivables in the prior year budget. Late fees and charges, we have $5,000 in there. The prior year budget, we collected $6,588. The current budget's $5,000. We're keeping it the same. Fines and CC&R violations. Now, we had collected in the prior year budget almost $32,000, $31,762 to be exact, and currently through 8 months we've collected $36,000. Sadly enough, I mean, these are all based on fines and violations. We'd like it to be 0, but nevertheless, it would be irresponsible not to account for such a material number. And nevertheless, these are numbers and revenue that is coming into the association. So we are making an effort to account for it, and we're putting it in at $30,000 in the hopes that it will be reduced over time and that compliance will rise. Then we have miscellaneous income. This is a catch-all. We don't know where it could come from, but in the event that income comes from some unforeseeable source, that's what this line item's for. And then we have interest earned. Now, last year, when rates were higher, we earned $45,755. This year, rates have been coming down. They're down in the low 4s, so we reduced that number, and right now it's a little north of $35,000. I'm hoping it will be higher than that, and I actually expect that it probably will, but I think it's a conservative number. And that leaves us with other income of $238,804, coupled with the assessment, leaves total income of $6,861,850. The other income component is $12.55. When you add that to the 348 assessments, it equals to 360.54, which is the amount that we need to satisfy our expenses. And is there any questions regarding income?
Yes. So theoretically, if we identify this other income, but we don't receive it, what is the impact? Does it only impact our owner's equity?
What it does, in a sense, everything will eventually impact owner's equity, because on the income statement, it shows our performance on the budget. We're either going to break even or we're going to have a net loss or a net gain. That eventually flows over to the balance sheet and will hit the owner's equity line. If nothing changes, there'll be no change in owner's equity. If we incur a lot of income gains, it will impact positively in the right direction, our equity line should go up. But if we sustain lots of losses in our net income and we do a very poor job with this budget, it's going to hit the owner's equity line eventually and drop it downwards. So yes, to your point, everything ultimately flows to equity, one way or the other.
Right.
Hey, Chuck, just a question on the income. The $13 increase from 330 to 346.
It's 348, it's $15.
Oh, it's 15. Oh,
It went from 333 to 348,
okay. Well, it said 13.
which is a
here.
4.5% increase and a $15 increase.
Well, it's a typo then. Because it
Yeah.
says
Under the
13.
explanation.
Yeah, in the explanation.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question on the,
Well, wait, I think Dave didn't finish his
oh,
No,
did you
I'm
finish?
good.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Typo.
The landlord fees, you're saying it's $100, so you're saying only 20 people a year move in? Because you only have a $2,000 amount here?
It's the changing of
Right.
tenants, so there is
Typically, it's
no
only 20, that's
guarantee
all.
of, we average a certain amount on, sorry, we average a certain amount on turnover with regard to sales of homes, but with tenants, that's a little more difficult to predict when a tenant's gonna change. So I think they just wanted to be conservative on that, and, I mean, it's a very small
Yeah.
piece of the income anyways, but,
And the prior year was like $3,155, so it was pretty
30.
modest, 31.
Not that big
31,
turnover.
Yeah.
Okay, and the move-in, move-out fees, what's the breakdown of that? Is that the $250 per?
yeah. Yep, that's the orientation, which includes
It-
the initial transponders and decals and gate keys and things like that.
And it's all, yes, it's the cost to the association for the staff time during the registration process, the new resident orientation. And of course, like Jim said, it includes the items received upon registration, transponders, keys, stickers, et cetera.
On the landlord fees, is it always consistently $100?
That's in our rules.
Then how we get to 55 there?
I don't know.
31.55.
Somebody gave us a little extra. They said, you know what, let me give you a little more this time.
Of the 348, is any of that coming out to add to the reserves?
Yeah, the 348 considers all of the expenses, which includes the reserve item that we
Yeah,
discussed.
because I know last year we took $3 extra specifically.
We did,
We
So-
yes.
increased it.
So, yeah, so this year, what are we taking, the
This,
same?
this year, we're doing
Oh,
10%.
10%, okay.
And I think originally we were at 5% last year, and it was the board's desire to increase it, and I think it brought it up to about 10% at the time.
Okay.
And
So
this
we're
time, we
content-
just came right in at 10%.
We're continuing with that.
And I think we're probably going to see us continuing that for a while.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to throw a wrench into the whole thing. So as I look at this, I'm looking at that 348, and I'm looking at I took a lot of notes on the different expenses here. And I want to talk about the equity fund. As you know, Chuck, from the day you came on the board, I have always been against using the equity fund to artificially deflate the monthly fees. All that does is kick it down the road, and eventually the gap gets bigger and bigger, and we had to do a catch-up in 1 year to get that done. So we have some fees that aren't going to be coming back. For instance, we've got legal fees for the golf course listed at $150,000. If we owned the golf course, those wouldn't be there. The odds are pretty good, the probability is good that within the next 15 months, either we're going to own the course or somebody else is going to own the course, but we'll be out of legal fees for that instance. So I'm going to change my tune on this one, and I would like to get some board input on this and some finance committee input. I would think this would be an opportunity to use equity because these are to actually subsidize the legal fee part of it. Whether we use, I assume the number will be somewhere between 100 and 200,000. I would ask, Chuck, you know the expenses coming up. The finance committee is closer. I would ask that you give us what would be a good number to use from the equity fund to reduce the fees, $8, $9, $10, whatever you guys think. I'll use your judgment. You're closer to it. You're the experts. You know it better. But I'd like to get the board's opinion on this, that I think this is a good opportunity to use equity, and I'm always against that. But in this case, because we're not going to be kicking anything down the road. Down the road, that expense is going away.
I agree.
Well, that was fast.
Yeah, no, you put that 250,000 in for the golf course, and that's for 12 months. And within the 12 months, there's going to be a big change.
Yeah.
And we're not going to have to spend that $250,000.
That 250 is going to be spent.
No.
Yeah, well, for some of it will be for fingers.
Right, well, if it's repurposed.
But the
yeah.
point is that
The point is, yeah,
we've,
Litigation's the line.
Right,
That's
that's the
really
big
the
one.
lion's share of what we're talking about.
correct.
right.
In past years, what has using equity to offset the assessment increases, the committee approached it that very same way in anticipation of a significant decrease in litigation. And of course, that got kicked down the road a little longer than we expected. But it was still, the decision to utilize it that way was the right frame of mind to do it in. You're not kicking this can down the road a long ways. It's a short-term thing. So that amount hopefully will be offset next year by that litigation line being reduced significantly. So from a manager standpoint, I think that's a solid way of thinking and a good gesture to make that attempt to use those funds to offset that this year's
Yeah, I just think this
increase.
is the right instance to do it, and I'd be interested in any opinions from the finance committee. You guys are smarter than I am,
Well, can we
except
be-
for Wendell.
Can,
Go ahead, Wendell.
I think one thing we need to keep an extra eye on is insurance this coming year.
Correct.
We have no idea what it's going to run, and there are many, many, many companies that are leaving this lovely state because of regulation and stuff. And owning a few rentals, I've had actually some HOAs that can't find insurance. So we need to be a little cautious.
Understood. In fact, speaking of that, I like the number you put in there, because I saw in the news now, you've got 22%, if I remember right, for the insurance increase. And I saw today State Farm is asking for a 22%, authority to do a 22% increase.
That's
So-
on homeowners, on rental.
Understood.
Yeah, on rental
Understood.
dwellings,
It's just
dwellings are like 40%.
It's just a metric, I get
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
so the number that you want to hit, have you got one in mind?
Yeah,
What do you want the assessment increase to
I'd
look
like to get it down, I'd love to get it down to 338, but maybe 340. Keep it an even number without putting us at risk. But again, I'm just throwing that number out there. I have not run everything against it, and I value the opinion from everybody over there and everybody up here. Del, you
Well,
had
the-
something?
When, Bruce, when you said, if we get it or somebody else gets it, then the lawyer stuff goes away, there's two things that I think of when I do that. If somebody else gets it, we may be right back from day one suing them again, but that's an unknown. But the other thing is, if we have that $800,000 lien as part of that they're gonna have to outbid our performance deed of trust of 2.5 and plus the 800. And if somebody outbids us there, we get that 800, right?
Right now, the lien is not at that level.
Right.
We're hoping to get it to
Well,
that level.
whatever it is,
but,
500?
It's around 400, a little under
400.
400.
Yeah, the point
Okay.
is, whatever,
That's money coming in, though.
right, whatever we have on the lien, that is money coming in that
Yeah,
would
so that's a good thing.
fund
what
any
you're
other
asking.
litigation.
Right, that's if someone else buys it, so.
Right.
Well, we're hoping we buy it, so that's gonna be hanging out there. And the 150,000 is $7, right? A little over $7 of the HOA fee. 7.88.
Yeah,
So,
$8.
So,
348, okay.
that, we're still gonna have some legal fees,
We were going to put in and keep $40,000 in,
right, so.
just as a placeholder, just in
Well,
case.
even with the settlement, we had fees
with the
coming to
litigation.
close the
There's
deal.
gonna be, yeah, there are gonna be some
Right.
fees, yeah.
Yeah, so we were going to, before, keep 40,000 in the litigation column, which is a difference of 110,000. We were going to reduce the golf course subsidy to 200. That's another 50. That's 160,000 that could potentially be repurposed. You know, if you reduced the equity, or rather the assessment, and you threw it into an equity line, subsidy line, normally I'm opposed to it on the litigation in the golf course, 160,000, give or take downstream, when things start to play itself out, which we think will occur certainly within 15 months, and hopefully far less than that. So a $10 increase on the assessment, by the way, which would bring it down to 343, that's only a 3% increase, which is still a modest increase, and it's not out of line. And that would only be $95,160 on the equity line, which is easily recoupable when litigation fees drop off. And we can start repurposing some of the funds from the golf course distribution. To Wendell's point, you could even go to $6, keep it at $343, and then throw the extra dollar into insurance. That would bring the insurance up to 40% increase, if we're worried about insurance premiums. And quite frankly, I am.
Yeah, I'd recommend
So-
that too.
So that's not a bad idea.
So one
there.
idea I thought would be go with $5 towards the equity subsidy. You have a $10 increase. I know it's not a flat number like 340. It's not pretty like that, but it's still only a 3% increase, right on the nose. And that's a very reasonable increase at 3%. And you want to kind of almost maintain that year in and year out.
Right.
Because that's usually what inflation is, give or take. And last year, as Jerry pointed out with the CPI, we were at 2.8%. So it's hanging right in there. And it's manageable because when these costs start to get reduced, we could have opportunities here to throw it back into equity by beefing up the contingency line, like we did a number of years ago, Shirley, as you recall, when we had it at like 100,000 or something.
Yeah, so this
at one
is
point.
good discussion. That's why I
So
wanted to
there's a
throw it
way
out.
in which we can recapture the equity by inflating contingency, and you bring it right back. Or if it happens like in June, we just leave and we're not taking the money out of litigation or the golf course, and guess what? Our equity is climbing like crazy. You know, so that could happen too.
And it can be repurposed for other hazards.
This is a particular year that I would embrace it.
Okay.
But moderately, maybe not a $8 equity thing, but I could.
even $5
I could
is
see,
a
I could
help.
see $5 going to reduce the assessment line, bring it to flat 10 at 3%, and then $1 going to insurance to make it 40% increase. And if we're pleasantly surprised and it stays at 22, that works as a contingency to help offset other expenses and beef up the equity. It will, in fact, partially offset the equity on the subsidy.
Chuck, what's the percentage if we do just 340?
If you brought, if you wanted to bring it down to 340 from $348, that would be $152,256 of equity.
What's a percentage?
No, she's saying what's the percentage increase? So right now, if you go to 343, you said it'd be
Oh, okay.
at a, that would be a 3% increase.
Yeah, if you brought it down to 340, let's see,
That's $7.
well, here, let me plug I got I'm gonna plug a number in the equity subsidy of $152,000, and, what was the number I used, Shirley? 152 what? 152,256.
256.
I'm putting in 152,256, because that is what you're talking about right here, 152,000. I'm gonna put 152,256.
I get 2.1.
Boom. Okay, it's 340. And so the variance would be, and it would be an increase of 2.1% from last year. And it would be a $7 variance, which is a very slight increase. But that's assuming there's nothing going to insurance or anything.
Right.
And that's 152,000. That means what we want to do is, as soon as the litigation drops off, instantly, we can put it back to a number of 40,000 like next year. That means I'm going to suggest and recommend to this board that 110,000 go in the contingency line. It has to.
Sure.
To bring it back. Then the monies that are in the golf course subsidy drop back to 200. We use it for the fingers and maintenance and restoration over a 3-year phase, and then take 50, put that in the contingency line, and then you'll get it back again.
Just know that because of the
160.
increase in the budget this year, your safety net, your 2.5 months is around 1.5 million is where you want to be. If we did more than what Chuck is suggesting, it's going to draw your safety net under $1 million. So you're going to have a good $600,000+ you're going to need to recover to get you back to your 2.5 months.
Yeah, so it's round numbers, 100,000 would be the $5.
Right now, our safety net at this budget is $1,429,552, and as of December, our equities were sitting at around $1,180,000, give or take, something in that area. So we're pretty far below it, you know.
That was my point. Industry standard, I'm looking here. If you divide our costs right now, our monthly is $571,820. So I remember we talked about equity a couple of years ago. It was 2.5, you said, we want 2.5 million of expenses in equity. Right, and that's what you're saying.
2.5 months.
2.5 months.
2.5 months.
Yeah.
Right. So right now, I mean, that's my concern, that we're not industry standard, which we don't have to follow, but just being the.
Actually, I didn't even think that was an industry standard. I
Isn't
thought
there a
that was a
standard out
bogey
there?
that was set up by a previous
I
board,
think
no?
we did.
No, it's something that.
Is it?
That the communities that are on top of things, they want to maintain a safety net
2.5.
of 2.5. And it depends on the size of the community. If you've got a community that's between 10 and $20 million budget, they can get away with a little less, because that number is still going to be a big number, 2 months worth of operating. But a community our size, 2 to 2.5 months is about where you want to be.
2 months is 1.143, 1,143,000. I mean, I'm just multiplying all that.
Again, it's the recovery that I think is the concern. I think the use of the funds as it's been described is noble, and I think very much worthwhile pursuing. It's just, what is that number? Is it $8 or is it $5? And
Well, I kind of like Chuck's suggestion of
I think it's a.
the one above
$5.
$5 and then
go to
save $1
$6 if we need
to
to.
cover us for,
I could do that. I don't want to.
I would make a recommendation as a board member, not as a finance committee chair, but as a board member, I'd make a recommendation for an equity subsidy of $6, $5 to work towards the assessment to bring it down to $3.43, which would be a flat $10 increase, 3%, and then use $1 to add to our insurance premium, which could act as a contingency or could cover us in case the insurance premium goes wild. That would be my recommendation.
And we can
I have a comment.
do that at the board meeting. Yes, Paul.
Yeah, we're not
If I'm allowed to
approving it today.
comment.
Go ahead, Paul.
We've been dealing with the golf course now for how many years?
12.
How many different directions has it gone? You know, they keep throwing, there's another suit, there's another move to another court, there's, you know, the current owners just seem to have this enormous bucket of cash that they're able to throw into their legal fees. And my concern would be, we don't know where this is going to end. You know, you said it could be a year, 15 months, maybe. You know, if it goes in another direction, it can be longer. And so to look at this a year from now and say, whoops, it didn't happen the way we thought it was going to, and now we're going to raise it from 340 to 370 or whatever to make up for the difference, I'm not sure that that would be the smart way to go.
Well, the good news is, and this is why we've consulted our attorneys, as we mentioned in the golf course meeting, they have no other options after the Supreme Court. It's done. They have filed the appeal to the Supreme Court. We are in the process right now of writing our response to that, and we expect very soon that the Supreme Court will take that and make a decision whether they will even hear it. The good news is the Supreme Court only accepts between 1% and 2% of all cases that come to them. So this would not be no attorney we've talked to feels this would be a case that the Supreme Court would accept. So that's why I said the probability is definitely with us. Is it a roll of dice? Every number we put on here is a roll of dice. The insurance is a great example there. We're not sure. But I think there's a higher probability for this than a lot of other things within here, and that's why I'm making that suggestion. Your point is well taken. I get it. I've only lived here 6 years now. It's been a longer road for everybody that's been here for all 12. Actually, we're in our 13th year right now.
Yeah.
And, but this, I'm confident, personally confident, I don't know where these guys stand, that there won't be anything in fiscal year 2026 that we have to worry about.
Well, I think it's a good idea, Chuck. I like your idea of $6. I just would, with the caveat that, you know, if we guess wrong, we pay for it next year.
And we're not draining the equity fund. We're, you know, I think what we're talking about, it's what, 110,000 for, if you do it $6,
It's
is that right?
$114,192.
okay.
100,000 here, 100,000 there. Before long, you're talking about real money.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the caution
all
of
real.
the caution of the Finance Committee has always been, since I've been on it, one of conservatism. And
should be.
we were very cautious about using equity. And we sat over here and argued with several different boards. And one of the other cautions that we have always talked about in committee is that even though we don't want to raise, we pay them too. We don't want to raise monthly fees or annual fees any more than they need to be. So we always start with expenses and then talk about how do we get the revenue to pay for those expenses. But if you purposely reduce fees year after year after year, you will go to a $50, you know.
That's right.
So that's my caution, first of all, and I'm a proponent and have argued it for quite some time of 2 to 2.5 months of expenses in our equity line, and we're not there.
Yep.
Shirley, can you explain what the committee does when they look at the expenses and to see if there's any place they can cut? What your rationale is and your thought process and how you do that?
Well, and I think Chuck did a good job of explaining all that as he started our meeting with what do we do and what's the process of putting a budget together. But I can tell you that we look at the expenses on a monthly basis, not just at budget time.
Yeah.
And question if things don't, what is that for and how did that get there? When we start the budget, we look at historic trends because that's where we are. We have to keep the place looking good, and we have to keep our investment protected, and we have to do the things that keep us protected. And so we look at our running rates of expenses over usually 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, and then say, what is inflation going to do to us? We purposely keep our large contracts not in the same year as as we recontract with someone. So our landscaping and protection and so on don't fall in the same year. But inflation always hits those, no matter how well the board negotiates. So those are the things that we look at. What's our running rate? What do we need to do? What do we need to spend? Where can we reduce things by wise spending? And what's inflation going to do with this? What are new contracts going to do to us? And then we have to come up with the money to pay for those things.
Thank you.
And our fees are very low. I mean, the committees.
Wait, yours are twice as much as ours.
Yes, they are.
We don't get free lunches, though.
That's true.
Slap your hand.
No such thing as a free lunch.
That's right.
Absolutely.
$7,000 in the budget,
You know, with Windows 40% versus the 22, I think that's about 18 grand extra it would be. Because
Yeah, 19.
we already brought it up 22, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can get insurance, yeah.
Yeah, my big fear is not the price, but if you can get it.
Oh, yeah. Well, we
And
can't
that's,
I wouldn't want to go
budget
to California Fair Plan.
no.
So you recommended to change the legal budget from 150 to 50,000?
Not at this point, no, but once the budget goes into play and it's been approved by the board, it's locked and loaded. Even if we find out in June that there's no need for our attorneys anymore because the acquisition occurred, it will then act as a contingency account to offset our equity subsidy. But it will stay in for the rest of the duration of this budget in that line, as will everything else that we agree upon and that the board approves at the next open session board meeting. Everything is locked and loaded. There's no mulligans or do-overs in the middle of the year. It doesn't work that way. So we will be locked in for that. But the good news is that we will know that that money that's not being spent is going to be offsetting all of our other expenses and can be bolstering our equity positions.
Correct.
Yeah.
Rather than repurposed, possibly.
Rather than repurposed. Although the monies that are in the golf course area, if the golf course, no need for a subsidy, perhaps that money could be repurposed and we can start getting going on the finger restoration with those funds that otherwise were supposed to be distributed to the receiver for some of the fingers.
That's a future consideration and decision, right?
Yes.
Repurposing, yeah.
Absolutely.
It
Yes.
doesn't automatically just become funny money.
No, it's going to be our decision as a board.
But you'll still be collecting it because it's already a part of the budget, or will
Yes.
be if you approve the budget.
And that's a best-case scenario.
So I'm still back to the 5 and 1. I don't know where you guys stand.
Well, do we have to make that decision today?
No.
What I would
we'll
do
it at
is
the board
just
meeting.
give a directive to the committee to prepare a version 3 that reflects the $6 subsidy.
I already got it in the sheet.
It's not a motion.
I already have it on the spreadsheet.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we'll bring that to the February meeting.
All right. All right, good. What else you got, Chuck?
I believe if there's no other further questions, we can move on to the next section.
Yeah. All right. Oh, yeah. Well, you can take it. All right, so we are going to move forward now. By the way, for those, if there's anybody new watching, you might wonder why are there all these questions going back and forth. These guys have been working on this for months. And this is the first time that they're presenting it to the board. So that's why we have lots of questions as we go through it. I want to first thank you guys for all the work you put in. It's a ton of work. I know what you go through. I had the opportunity to sit in the meeting last week, and we are so blessed to have a finance committee with people like you on it. So thank you. We are now going to move into member comments. And member comments work like what we normally do. You'll come up to the front. You have 3 minutes. What we do ask, this is a workshop for the budget. So we are limiting comments, questions, limited to how it impacts the budget. If you have other comments, questions about other things outside of that, we'll be up here afterwards. You can come up and ask us those. So with that, I'm going to open it up for, go ahead. Tony, kick it off for us.
What a surprise.
Hi. Great work. Thank you, guys, especially the volunteers that step up and do this on that committee. My name is Tony Harris. I live on Via Amapola. First one's a very specific item, 6635 janitorial supplies. A couple of years ago, we spent 39 grand. This year, or next year, you're budgeting 40. Wouldn't the vendor that we're now spending $52K a year on provide some of those materials and reduce that budget line item? Anyway, that's up to you guys.
Do we have a vendor? Is that what
I thought you had a janitor now. You've hired an outside janitorial service.
And the question is, can they provide that?
Wouldn't they be providing some of the chemicals?
No.
Oh.
No,
okay.
they're just providing, it's a labor contract.
Okay, perfect. And then the last part of your discussion had me a little concerned, and I respectfully disagree with you, that reducing the golf course aid package and the legal side of it, I think could be a could be a mistake. You don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if some miracle on their part, not ours, but some miracle happens and it gets to a Supreme Court. But if something does happen, further, I think if we don't get the golf course, we're almost assured we're going to get more litigation. So the idea that we're going to get out of it by not getting it, if we do get it, if we think someone's not going to pop up with more of these nuisance suits that are going to cost us money, and if the attorneys, quite frankly, are so confident, maybe they can give us a written guarantee, then we won't have to worry about it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. Who else has a question? Dee Dee.
Yes, I do. Good afternoon, Finance Committee and our HOA. I have on one of the lists you showed, pool monitoring, pool management, pool equipment, pool supplies. Why do you have them in 4 different categories, and what do they stand for? That's my first question. The second thing is, why are we still spending $13,000 a year on coffee? Okay, I don't get that. We don't have enough functions where they're serving coffee. I've been to several of them, and they're not serving coffee. They're serving water. The last thing I have is, apparently you want revenue, and I'm wondering, and I hope this doesn't upset some of you, but why aren't we leasing our offices to Associa? That's a revenue that we could be taking in. Those are my 3 questions. Thank you.
The questions regarding the pool supplies and that type of thing, one is the pool monitoring, which is in a completely different area of the budget. That's the security officer that is out there during certain times of the year. And there's a budgeted cost that we get a quote for each year to cover that cost. We used to have the the pool management, the cleaning, the company that does the pool maintenance, and the chemicals used to be bunched into one line, and that's not typical in communities like this. I'm not sure why we did it for so many years that way, but last year we made the determination to separate those two, so it's more accurate as to what we're paying that service to do. And we can also track the impact of the amount of chemicals, and you can see that easier as well. And then there are, I think there's one other line that is for pool supplies. Well, the management is the contract of the company that cleans it for us. That's the management line. But the pool supplies is different from chemicals. Those are things like pool signs and thermometers and just different things that we need. And that's typically a smaller number in the budget. We don't spend a lot in that line. But those are the different categories that are applicable to the pool. Did we cover all those? I'm not sure if I hit all the lines that you were talking about, but there are several, and they all have different purposes that relate to the pool. I mean, the board can speak if it chooses regarding the Associa renting office space, but I will tell you, in the industry, in on-sites, I know you're sick of hearing this, but I've been doing this for a long time, and it's always been an on-site community that I've always worked in. And it doesn't matter what the management company is, if you have an on-site staff that's dedicated to only that property, it's customary that the association provides those facilities for that on-site staff. What ends up happening, if there were to be a negotiation for them paying for it, that's going to come out in your contract. Somebody's got to pay for the cost, the overhead of what it costs to manage the association. And if we have to pay to rent space to do that, that'll end up in the contract with the association. So, and every management company you talk to would be faced with that same expense that they would have to, now it would be competitive, but you're going to have your price that you would want to charge for that. So everybody's going to know that that's the number that we got to include in the contract price. So it's again a customary thing that the space is typically covered. It's sometimes you get a facility that's big enough that has a separate building that's just management, and others that are like ours where we're embedded into the clubhouse, and when you see it every day, it kind of weighs on you, wondering why are they taking up space in here when we could be using it for other things. And so I understand the argument that gets made on that on occasion. Yeah, it's one way or another, you're gonna make it a wash somewhere. It's either gonna be provide the space or we rent it and you cover it in the contract.
Jim, let me just throw a different perspective for you, Dee Dee. It was a good question and a fair question. The way I look at it, and I'm not saying everybody does, but having Jim and his staff on site is actually an amenity for us, because you know where you can go and talk to the people that to get things done, or to answer your questions, or to pay your bills, your whatever. I've lived in other ones where they're not on site, and then you got to hop in your car, you got to travel to, gosh, this last one, I can't even remember, Avalon, they were somewhere in the middle of nowhere. It's actually an amenity, it's a convenience, let me say that, instead of an amenity. It's a convenience for people to have the staff here, and it's hard to put a price tag to that. Yeah.
Coffee, 68 cents, 68 cents a month. 68 cents a month. You know, I can go to any podunk auto place, they have coffee out there. I've been to when I had my trailer, traveling, every single location had coffee. It's an amenity. It's something expected. It's 68 cents a month. I don't think that's something we should ever even consider cutting out. We have coffee here. We have coffee at events. We have a coffee at our committee meetings. It's just a nice amenity to have.
Dee Dee.
Well, I disagreed with you on that.
Yeah, right.
Well,
I know.
Dee-
Dave's got a
I
done.
know you did.
I know. We'll take it out of the mulch, though.
I've been here for over 12 years now, and this has been a consistent subject being brought up every year, just about. We get asked about, and yeah, one time we had the candy. Now, they did drop the candy. We don't supply the candy anymore, but the coffee is, as Greg mentioned, has been considered an amenity. It's hard to drop it.
Well, Dee Dee, just so you know,
Yeah.
I almost had an article in the news magazine that said, "Did you know?" about coffee.
Yeah.
And Kara and I, we explored vending machines where it would be more financially lucrative to have more of a payment for coffee. The cost of the coffee creamers, when we really broke it down, some people put 25 cents in, some people put $1, and some people don't put anything at all. So we're not taking it out of mulch, Greg, sit down. No, I've had the same issue, but I keep getting shot down that it's an amenity and that's what we're going to have to live with. But I think it's worth, oh, don't give me 68 cents.
It is 68 cents. That's what I'm giving you.
I don't drink
That's what
coffee.
it
Can I
is.
have a reduction
Come on
in my
now,
fee?
boys.
I don't drink coffee. Can I have a reduction in my fee?
Before, Marianne?
Yes?
Marianne, hold on one second. Could you please explain, Jim, the relationship between Associa and PCM? I think some people are confused that you're Associa and you're not really Associa, you're PCM.
Associa is the parent company of PCM, Professional Community Management. The company I work for was acquired by Associa back in 2010. They went through a series of different brandings along the way, where we even had the Associa name, where we were having that in the forefront of our company, of the services that we provide. But the company has now backed away, and they're allowing these companies that they've acquired to rebrand their services, their company, back to the original name and reputation and that type of thing that those different businesses had built over the years. So now we still use the same operating system that Associa provides to all of the companies that it has acquired over the years, but you're going to see a lot more of those companies that are operating under their original names, that you'll see just Associa maybe in small print off to the side. But and I'm quite
But if
frankly.
somebody drives down the street and they see a building that's got the name Associa on it, it doesn't mean that you could actually do business out of that building.
So that's a good point. And also, some people will see the Associa name thinking that they can call that office and talk about their account here at the colony. And no, based on what I said, Associa is a parent company that owns several, actually hundreds of management companies that is acquired over the years. Yeah, they're an umbrella over the top. And now, again, they're allowing these companies to run their businesses the way they've built their businesses over the years. You know, with some rules we have to fit under the corporate, again, umbrella and their philosophies to a degree, but to Kathy's point of making that clarification, you see the Associa name out there, you can't necessarily associate that with what you're getting here at the colony. That's PCM, Professional Community Management. We're based out of Foothill in Orange County, and those are the people I answered to directly next to them and him. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Marianne?
Sorry, Mary Ann.
Bad knee.
Oh, yeah, I gave you the long answer, and you had to go sit down. Sorry about that.
Well, this isn't going to be a very popular suggestion, but for the future, I'm a one-person, first of all, our HOA fee is based on our property, correct? My home, my property. Okay, I'm a one-person property owner.
Me too.
And for those of you who are two, you're using twice the facilities that I am, correct? Two people versus one? I was just going to think, this is kind of a strange request, but in the future, for budgeting, perhaps the one-person home would be less $20, $25 a month than the two-person home. That's my suggestion. I'm not using as much of the facilities as two people are. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And certainly not the first time I've heard that concern being raised, and I certainly have great understanding and empathy for those situations where there are single person in the household. But the way that the colony is structured and organized is each lot is a member, regardless of how many people reside at the home. So every single member has to pay their fair 1,586th of the cost to run the association. So that would be a tough one to overcome. Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry. I wanted to compliment the Finance Committee. I've watched this for several years, and this is an excellent Finance Committee. Thank you all very much. And you can see that in the detail that they put into this budget. There's a $13.14 a month is the assessment for the, not the assessment, it's the portion for the golf course per month, is that it? And if we end up with a golf course, which I think we ultimately will, I'm just not sure how many of us will still be alive, that money could then be repurposed for something else for the golf course. So it's still a golf course subsidy. It just may not be for mowing the lawn. It may be for fingers or something. Is that correct?
That would be the idea. We have fingers that are impacting the community, and we have some major ones that are out in the front as you come into the community, and they're also behind a lot of our neighbors' homes. So the idea would be at some point to restore them to their beauty and maintain them. The initial budget that we recently got, it would be $500,000 to restore these fingers. Obviously, we wouldn't have that if the golf course subsidy were to be available, but we certainly can do this over maybe a 3-year period. So my recommendation to my colleagues would be to repurpose those funds to start restoring at least some of the fingers, the major ones that have the biggest impact in the community.
But a golf course subsidy remains a golf course subsidy. It's not used for other things.
We would designate it. Yes, it would for this budget, absolutely.
Okay.
It would be called that.
When you start on the project for the barbecue area, there's going to be a number of items that will have to come out of equity because it's simply not all reserves. So from an equity standpoint, the legal fees, if let's say the legal fees go away by July, because we own the golf course and we go down in that. Those legal fees then, are you using those to build up I was confused, are you using those to build up equity again?
If there's no legal fees and the money is not being utilized for that and they're just sitting there, it would go to the bottom line of our income statement. It would help bolster the net income potentially and turn into a gain. And that gain eventually gets over into the balance sheet, and that does impact positively our our owner's equity.
Okay, and we were already supposed to pay $1,995, and at the time that we voted for that, costs were probably 35% less than they are today. So is it possible that that money would go for restoration?
It would be my hope that some of those monies would go towards the restoration, or at least in terms of the fingers. We do have money set aside from the special assessment that would go to the restoration of the golf course, and we've already taken a look at some of the budgets that have been presented to us from JC Golf.
Okay.
Based on that.
And the last statement has to do with, there are HOAs who do not have maintenance fees per se, or they don't, how am I put this? They don't have an equity fund.
Right.
They have to, and it's not a legal requirement to have an equity fund, but if you don't have an equity fund, those places have assessments, very large assessments, whenever they need extra money. So if you're a multimillionaire, you don't care. I would rather keep my money in the bank until you give me the assessment and I'll pay that. But we're not multimillionaires, most of us. So the assessment fund is there to take care of those miscellaneous costs also. We don't have to. So I think that's...
It's also there, well, primarily, to cover
for
shortfalls.
Protection.
And the unforeseens that might crop
Right.
up. But what you're referring to, at least based on the way you're explaining it, is more along the lines of what I was talking about earlier on the requirement for a reserve study by law.
Right.
And the fact that the law does not require that you fund it. And the reason why I don't think the law requires you fund it is that you'd have to set a standard of percentage that they'd have to meet in order to do that, and not every association looks at their financial situation with their association the same as maybe another. And what I mean by that is there are some very wealthy
Yes.
associations that they feel they can save and make their money grow much better than the association can, or they might want to be more risky with those funds because
Right.
your policy for finances or for dealing with investments is a very conservative route. It's always going to be FDIC insured and to guarantee you're not losing your principal.
And they don't care about assessments. If you get
and so-
assessments, it's no big deal.
if they run into a reserve item, they just say, tell me what the amount is, I'll write you a check. They're wealthy enough that works
Right.
for them.
So for this association, we don't have assessments very rarely.
We don't have that luxury, yeah.
Right. So we're much
we
better
fund
the way
it.
we are.
Yep.
Thank you.
Looks like Sharon's coming up.
I noticed in the budget, one of the items said there was for recreational sponsored events. Can you give me an example of what that is?
Everything Kara does.
So the weekend,
Most of
like
what
when
she
they have
does.
a band in,
Isn't that a wash?
Yes.
It is.
And that's what we
Not-
talked about. There's an income side to it, and there's an expense side of it.
Like the Easter egg hunt, things like that the entire community's invited.
Okay,
Those
I
are
got it.
considered things where we're not asking for money, we're just sponsoring something.
And then there were two items that I can't delineate the difference. The $20,000 contingency fund and the $12,000 miscellaneous. What's the difference?
Miscellaneous would be something that, like we have an ongoing expense for shredding. It's a very small amount. It gets charged to the miscellaneous account. We just plug in some dollars. It also covers things that might come up through the year that we're not expecting but could be an ongoing expense. We would put it to that, like we brought in a consultant for some work to do that wasn't budgeted for or contracted ahead of time, that we charge to that line on the miscellaneous. The contingency line is really just a shortfall line, kind of a little bit like our equity that we have sitting off to the side. But this is something that we have used as we don't ever want to have anything to charge against it if we can get away with it, but it just covers anything unexpected is what the contingency line is for. Unexpected.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
They're very similar lines.
Yep. Anybody else?
I would just like to say, as Joanne pointed out, we do have the patio project coming up, which is not all reserve. It'd be kind of nice to have an extra $100,000 in equity. If you're still thinking about robbing Peter to pay Paul later, the $5, it'd be nice to have it in there.
That's a fair argument. All right. With that, again, thank you, everybody, board, Jim, and have a motion to adjourn.
No, let's stay here.
Kathy has a motion.
I'll second it. I'd also like to make sure we give Jim just 3 minutes.
Per meeting.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Oh, my God, don't make me laugh.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate it. And those tuned online.